Welcome to another episode of the Not Another Yoga Class podcast and LinkedIn Live series. Today, we've got a great guest, the mindfulness rock star, mindfulness coach, Steve Ware. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good. So today, I wanted to talk about a word that keeps popping up. I'm obviously having a lot of conversations with companies doing what we do.
Yeah.
And one thing just keeps popping up. It's unavoidable. And that word is burnout. And so because this is something that you deal with on a daily basis, I wanted to bring you in and have a little bit of a discussion. What is burnout? Why is it so bad? Why does it cost businesses so much?
Yeah.
And what can we do to kind of fix it? What can we do to address it? So let's start with, what is it?
I guess the best way to answer that, if you've been through burnout, is to just describe what it meant to you, right? Because then it's very personal and you're not kind of quoting anyone else's theory. So for me, it meant it was hard, mate. It was really, really hard. It meant sleepless nights and high anxiety with probably a bit of depression's a strong word, but I was certainly low mood as well. So the two big things, I guess, for me were feeling really anxious all the time, not really knowing why, and my sleep just going from really great to horrific, to a point where I just dread going to bed because I just think, it's a horrible feeling, dreading your bed, because you just know it's a horrible place to be, a place where you're going to feel fearful and not sleep, and your mind's going to kind of torture you as much as it wants to. So probably that's probably the most succinct definition, I'd say. I mean, everything that goes along with the lack of sleep, lethargic and low energy, low mood, and just everything feels like hard work. Everything feels like hard work. Just getting up and doing something feels like hard work. So yeah, I sometimes think the word is thrown around too easily, in the same way that people throw around the word flu if they've just got a cold, or depression if they've just had a couple bad days. And I think if you've experienced proper burnout, you'll realize that, like I see people post on LinkedIn, other socials, and say, oh, yeah, I burned out the other day and now I'm back. And I'm like, you didn't burn out the other day and now you're back, because you just had a bad day, or you just had a terrible night's sleep, or do you know what I mean? When I burned out, you don't bounce back within half a day or half an hour or a week. It takes probably longer for you to burn out, and it takes longer for you to come back. So for me, it's a serious thing. It's a really serious thing. And it annoys me a little bit when people misuse it, because it kind of plays the word down when people who have really experienced it use the word.
How long does it take to recover from? When you do get to that point, what sort of recovery period are we looking at?
I mean, that's almost how long's a piece of string, I think. It depends on the person, depends on how burned out they are, depends on what tools they've got in terms of recovery, in terms of, it would depend on how resilient that they are as a person. So for me, I kind of had nothing really. So I was great at looking after my body, I thought. I was never a big drinker, never smoked, love exercising, gym, blah, blah, blah. So my body was always pretty good, but I'd never done anything for my mind. So when I burned out, I didn't know what to do or how to fix myself, because I thought, well, I'm eating the right stuff. I'm not drinking too much. I'm not smoking anything. I still feel like crap. And so it was the mind bit that was missing for me. It was working with my mind. My mind was this like runaway train that just, when it wanted to think, it thought. When it wanted to be anxious, it would make me anxious. I had no control over it. I had no way of, it just totally ran my life. And that's kind of fine if everything's cool, but when everything's not cool, it hurts. So
do you think it would have been worse if you hadn't had those other things in line, that you weren't exercising, you weren't eating right?
For sure. Because, I mean, I teach mindfulness, right? You've really kind of described that. And mindfulness is just one thing. It's an incredible thing. It's probably the most powerful thing I've ever tried in my life. But it's not a panacea, and it's not an instant fix, and it's not a quick fix necessarily. So, and combined with that are loads of other great things. Like, you've got to have your nutrition and your exercise and your social kind of side to your life. So it's one of many great tools you have as part of the kind of, for me, it's part of the pantheon of good things that I try and do every day to make myself as well as I can be.
I can actually attest to this mindfulness thing, because I read one of your posts relatively recently. I don't know if you remember, I commented at the bottom. I said, I'm going to try this, and I did.
Yeah.
And the effect wasn't immediate for me.
Yeah.
There might have been a small amount of calming, but the next day I felt incredible.
Wow.
On a totally different level, because I felt like I was really in touch with everything that I was doing. I was experiencing, the pitch deck I was writing. I was 100% focused on the call I was having. Suddenly, all of these things kind of shifted for me. So I'm glad you brought the mindfulness aspect into this, because for me, it definitely helped, and I've only dabbled.
Well, that's big, mate. You just used some big words there. I think you used the word incredible. That's a pretty big superlative, isn't it? I mean, one thing I love, and I work with a lot of men, I work with a lot of women as well, but probably the thing I niche down on quite a lot is working with cynical men, working with men. Probably the most cynical men tend to be in their 40s and above, I would say. I'm in my 50s. So certainly my generation and older are very cynical about mindfulness. I think it's very woo-woo, very tree-huggy, very BS. The younger generations coming through, the kind of teens, 20-somethings, even the 30-somethings are much more open to this. They're like, why wouldn't we look after our mental health? It's a no-brainer. So I always love hearing, from cynics like you, because I was a massive cynic too, right? When it has an effect. And I would say to anybody listening to this, if there's 1% of you that's tempted to give it a go, just give it a go, and don't expect anything big. Don't expect fireworks and huge changes in your life, but just give it a go and be open-minded. And that's all you can ever do, right? I would never preach to somebody, you've got to try this, it's going to be great for you. But I would encourage you, even if there's the tiniest glimmer in you, most of it, 99% of your brain saying, nah, it's rubbish, it won't do anything. 1% saying, well, it's been around for 2,500 years and the science is pretty damn convincing now, and there's a lot of people do it, sports stars, everybody else. I'd encourage anybody who's got that little bit in them to just try it. But you've got to try it in the right way. You've got to try it. You've got to be gentle with yourself. You've got to find a good teacher, because if you try it the wrong way, it's like anything. It's like trying to exercise and doing it wrong and hurting yourself and just thinking, oh, exercise is rubbish.
So here's my question. What's the most effective way to bring mindfulness into the organization to help reduce burnout, to affect these levels of burnout?
Yeah, so we're talking a serious problem here. We're talking burnout, right? So the answer to that is never going to be a keynote. You could go and get the greatest mindfulness teacher in the world and pay them 10 grand and ask them to come and do an hour's keynote. As brilliant as that may be, the problem with that would be that people would leave with probably quite a lot of conceptual knowledge of what mindfulness is. They'd understand what it is and what it isn't. They may have had a little go at it in the session, but they'll leave with kind of lots of knowledge probably. They may be inspired. They may stand up and give a great ovation at the end. But the big mistake that most businesses make, and we made this mistake at IBM, is not giving people long enough to introduce us into their life in a way that's actually going to start to have a proper effect. So the answer to your question would be probably an 8-week course. And that 8-week course, it sounds heavy. It's not that heavy. It's only 8 sessions. It's 8 sessions of 90 minutes. There's one session a week for 8 weeks. It's 12 hours over 2 months. It's not that long. You spread it out. And you just get people to try different ways of calming their mind, of quietening their mind, of building their resilience, of dealing with difficulty, of being kinder to themselves. And when you do those things and you give people a chance to practice, you know what it's like because you're a fitness guy. The cumulative effect starts to kick in and starts to happen. Why would I say 8 weeks? Because if you look at any of the peer-reviewed, scientifically proven, double-blind science on this, almost all of them will take their readings over a period of 8 weeks. So you can pretty much say that as far as the science goes, the tipping point at which you're going to start to see physiological differences in you. Let's say we hooked you up, Jamie, with an HRV monitor. Let's say we put you in an fMRI scanner, before, during, and after, and all this kind of stuff. We'd expect to see results at the 8-week mark if you did 10 minutes of practice a day for those 8 weeks. So that's what you could expect physiologically. Forget people anecdotally saying, I do feel better, this and that. We want hard scientific measurements. Most companies do, I guess. So they'd look to that kind of research, and that research would say 8 weeks at least. The greatest companies in the world, the Googles, the IBMs, they've got programs where they'll put someone through an 8-week program, and then they'll have ways of kind of topping it up consistently throughout the year, because it's like a good diet, it's like good exercise, it's never a one and done. So, but a minimum of 8 weeks.
What's the best way of distributing that over the workforce, do you think? Is it to give this experience to a select group of quite influential people? Is it to look more broadly?
I would say, firstly, the most important thing is to get people to opt in. Never, ever mandate this. Don't say run a mindfulness course for this team or for our senior leaders. You're all going on it, ladies and gents, because some people may not want it. It may not be appropriate for them at this time, right? So I would say before we get to the 8 weeks, what I would do is run either one of two things. I'd either run an introductory keynote, that's kind of like the movie trailer before the movie, so that you get at the end of that 1 hour, people would say, oh yeah, I like what this guy's saying, it's starting to resonate with me, I would want to go on a course. Or I'd run something slightly better. Remember when Joe Wicks did the Wake Up with Joe 15-minute workouts during lockdown? Did you get them in Thailand?
Yeah.
So I do a mind equivalent of them. So it's 2 weeks worth, 10 days, work days, and we just do 15 minutes. And it's all 15 minute stuff taken from my 8-week courses. It's almost a little try before you buy. So you could send a lot of people on that and say, look, if you want to dip your toe in, see if it's for you. So you then create this kind of funnel and this filter, and at the bottom, drop through the people who say, I've tried it and understand what it is now. I can feel what it is now. I definitely want more. The only other catch just one important point, because if you mentioned senior leaders, and you can mix senior leaders with more junior people. You can mix managers with people that are being managed by that person. You've got to make sure that everyone feels psychologically safe. That's really, really important.
That was my question.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I do some work. I've taught both, right? I've taught a course. I did a course at IBM before I left there, and it was an entire team, and 2 of them were managers, and they really bonded on these 8 weeks because the managers brought their full selves. The managers didn't present themselves as robots that never feel stress and never lose sleep and think everything's rosy, right? We're going through tough times at IBM then, and people called it out. We called a spade and said, how are we going to deal with this, and how are we going to build our resilience to cope with this? So it can be incredibly bonding if you get it right. I've also had stories of other mindfulness teachers where, they've taught senior leadership teams. And I remember one guy telling me a story. He had the senior leaders of a massive car company, won't say which one. And they were sitting down and he said, he said, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, we'll just do a short practice. And they all kind of looked around and then looked at the trainer, and he was like, everyone all right? And they said, everyone basically said, I wouldn't close my eyes in front of these guys. I don't trust them. So psychological safety is a real, really important point that you must pick up on before you dive into 8 weeks, because people might want to talk about something personal, and it's got to be confidential, and they've got to feel safe.
I love the idea of it humanizing people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a leveler. It's a huge leveler. I've taught individuals worth over 200 million quid. I've taught people that are earning 20 grand a year, and they're both the same to me, because you're a human being coming through this course with emotions and feelings, and that's what we're going to work on. It doesn't matter what your bank balance says or what car you got. It's a massive level of this, because you strip all the materialism away and you're just left with two human beings, which I love.
Absolutely, especially if all they know up to that point is this relationship of manager, junior, or whatever it may be.
Yeah. People, vulnerability is an incredibly powerful thing, isn't it, in leadership, if you get it right. I'm not saying, be overly vulnerable, but people, I think strong, empathic, powerful leaders that share vulnerability only adds to their presence as a manager and their influence and the respect they get, for sure.
Steve, we've basically come to the end of our time, but is there, it's quicker.
Isn't it? God, that is.
Yeah. If people wanted to find out more about you and what you offer in terms of mindfulness, where would they go?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You mentioned LinkedIn earlier, so just Steve Ware Mindfulness, you'll find me on there. Or my website is just stevewaremindfulness.com. 2 easiest places to find me.
Brilliant. Cheers, Steve. This was great.
Thank you. Thanks, man.